Anaxa and Phainon vertical investment priority list. Now, for me personally, this is a pretty important topic since my main DPS on my main account is Phainon, and my ult account is maining Anoxa, right? So, both of these characters I love to talk about, and it just so happens that Saridra is best in slot for these two, right? So, I'd love to talk about Saridra's value for them. I will start off with Phainon, since Phainon's is obviously easier and more straightforward. Phainon's priority list, number 1, E2. It will always be E2. Even current Saridra E1S0 or E0S1 loses noticeably to Phainon's E2 in MOC, and in Pure Fiction or APOC, it only becomes an even bigger gap. It is the most broken E2 in the game as of current. That'll probably change in the future. However, for now, its value cannot be denied, especially for Phainon vertical investment. There is no other better option, right? Outside of this, we next go into Lycone versus Saridra. These two are actually very close in value for increasing Phainon's overall performance. However, the way I'd kind of, put it for most people to understand, if you only plan to put one cost into this, by this I mean you pull E0S0 Saridra and you're done investing in her, or you pull Lycone and you're done investing in it, then the Lycone, I'd argue, is higher value because it's harder to replace his Lycone with that base speed buff than it is to replace Saridra, who can just lose value over time quite easily, given power creep for generalist supports just increasingly becoming better and better, right? However, if you do plan to go future vertical investment, like even further, like you pull Saridra now, and then on her rerun you want to go E1, S1, whatever, right? Then Saridra is obviously the better value because super impositioning Lycones in this game is trash, right? The return on investment, it is very, very bad. Even for Phainon, who is one of the best, characters to get super impositions on, it's still garbage, right? So that's how it goes. If you only plan to put one cost, get a Lycone. If you plan to put more going into the future, get Saridra, because she also has Eidolon investment to dive into, right? And then after this, it's Sunday. Sunday, always going to be a solid choice. 20% crit rate, ER gen, SP positivity, you can't go wrong, right? Now, I'm going to do a different section here, specifically for Phainon, being sustain team, because we all know it. Phainon is going to get a much different level of performance with sustain, especially when Dan Heng comes up. And this does change the value of a support. So it's still number 1 E2. However, number 2 priority is now like a three-way tug of war between Sunday, between his Lycone, and between Saridra. Now, in my opinion, I would actually put Sunday between both of these because of his value outside of only Phainon teams. I know this is specifically for Phainon Vertical, however, he is so competitive with these two in value alongside Dan Heng that I truly think maybe losing 5% overall, performance for Phainon is worth it because of how much more valuable this guy is, right? The reason I say this, when Dan Heng comes out, synergizes with Sunday because of Dan Heng putting a summon on an ally, and this leads to Sunday giving this ally 50% more damage boost. You can test this yourself with your own team comp in the current MOC by not using Sunday's technique buff, which gives 50% damage bonus, and then using his technique buff and seeing how much the first meteor does in both scenarios. For me personally, with no technique buff, I got 1.08 million, and then when I used the technique buff for the 50% damage bonus, I got 1.2 million. So around a 10% or slightly higher damage increase. And this is considering I'm using Robin, Branya, and Sunday. All three of these characters give damage boost. So if you have a character who isn't also giving damage boost, you have someone else, I don't know, a Tribby or something, damage boost becomes increasingly more valuable to increasing Phainon's overall final damage, right? So in sustain teams, I'd argue it goes E2, then Sunday, and then Lycone or Ceridra fight over it, right? That is my opinion. Next, we move on to Anaxa. Anaxa's is a lot more interesting because he has so many second slot options. However, the number one priority for Anaxa will always be Sunday. Sunday's 20% crit rate, ER gen, SP positivity, as mentioned earlier for Phainon, incredibly value, but for Anoxa, even more so, right? So 100% Sunday is the number one vertical investment you can get for your Anoxa. After Sunday, it's 3 characters fighting in the third slot, being Ceridra, Tribby, and Robin. If you have Tribby and Robin E1, then they are better than I believe even E1 or E0 S1 Ceridra for Anoxa. However, at E0 S0 specifically for all 3 of these supports, Ceridra does beat them by around 5 to 10%, I believe. However, something that should be taken into account here is because Ceridra is such a small buff compared to Robin or Tribby for Anoxa, there's a pretty good chance that when Cyrene releases, she could actually possibly be the best in slot for Anoxa instead of Ceridra, because being an RMC upgrade is already like incredible stocks to have, because RMC's true damage is incredibly powerful. It is an insane amplifier, and in a lot of situations it's better than Bronya, it's better than Sunday, and it's competitive with like Robins or Tribbies for overall damage buffing capability. And this is the free MC. So just imagine if they give Cyrene better treatment than they did RMC, very good chance that Cyrene will be better than Ceridra, Robin, or Tribby, and on top of this probably have the better Eidolon investment as well. So keep this in mind. Cyrene is like 4.5 months away, maybe less, right? She's in 3.7, actually on the horizon. So keep in mind, because Ceridra is such a small buff compared to Robin and Tribby, I'd argue she's the least valuable between the 3. And then on top of this, even if you do pull her for the 5 to 10% overall buff for your Anoxa's performance, very good chance that Cyrene instantly power creeps this and then has the even better Eidolon investment and value in other teams. So take this into consideration. So because of all this hoopla, I would say after all of this, we need to talk about the Lycone. Even though Anoxa gets the smallest jump in Lycone versus no Lycone performance in Amphorius for a main DPS, he does still get a jump. It's near 20%, right? The main reason for pulling the Lycone is the defense reduction that stacks alongside the Genius set if you're running him with that, and as well as the energy, right? It does regen energy at the start of his turn. This can make it easier to get ults off, especially on second wave. You might be able to get an ult off and instantly double skill on your first turn, which is some really nice QOL, and it allows you to run attack rope instead of ER rope, right? Leading to a much higher overall damage increase for Anoxa, right? So, in my opinion, Anoxa, number one vertical investment is Sunday. After Sunday, I'd actually say if you already own Robin or Tribby, it's his Lycone. However, if you don't own Robin, Tribby, or Ceridra, you would then probably get Ceridra for his own performance, Robin or Tribby if you value general use outside of Anoxa teams as well. And then if we're comparing E1s, I believe it's E1 Tribby, then E1 Robin, and then E1 Ceridra, right? And then we also have Cyrene on the horizon, who will likely power creep all of these characters in an Anoxa team and have even better Eidolon investment than all of them. So Anoxa's team, I highly suggest anyone, really looking for vertical investment into this guy, just wait until Cyrene comes around, because when she does come around, Tribby's rerun will be close, right? So even if I'm wrong, like on 3.7 or maybe a patch after, Tribby will probably get her second rerun and you can just go for that. You can be safe this way, right? You can be completely safe. Robin will probably get a rerun in a few patches as well. truly the best option for anyone going for Anoxa vertical investment. Pull Sunday and then wait for Cyrene. That's it, right? And then Phainon, E2, highest priority. After this, it's between the Lycone or Ceridra. If you want to go long-term, get Ceridra. If you don't want to keep, investing into Phainon forever, just get the Lycone, right? And then the last piece to the puzzle, Sunday. In sustained teams, I'd argue Sunday has better value than either the Lycone or Ceridra, with E2 still being the highest priority. So, that's a lot of yap, right? I appreciate you all sticking with me throughout the entirety of this video. Those are my opinions on the vertical investments for Anoxa and for Phainon. Love you all. Hope you have a great day. Hope you have a great night. And peace out.